December 10th, 2021. In the Old Testament, it seems like you don't like our bodies, especially not our cycles, our wombs that bleed and are unclean. But if that were true, you would never have chosen a uterus as your dwelling place for many months. The very blanket you chose was that disdained fluid we always hide. It could seem as if our bodies are something shameful, as only a stumbling block for others, and should be hidden 100% of the time. But if that were true, you wouldn't have chosen the breasts of a young woman to provide nourishment and warmth for the Holy One. And instead of a grand double-door entrance, you, King, decided on a wide-open cervix and birth canal. If you were afraid of messes or didn't really like how human and imperfect we are, you would stay far away from the blood and the water, groaning and screaming, the visceral, euphoric, desperate scene of childbirth. But you chose to so honor and redeem that fundament of our human condition that you took part in it. The first temple for Christ was the body of a woman, and the very first sign of God's holy presence in our world was a period that never came. In society and in church, I feel like we so often brush right over all of the details of this story. We talk about Mary suddenly became pregnant. I mean, that is miraculous, as she was a virgin, but Mary became pregnant, and then she gave birth, and then we just kind of skip ahead to whatever Jesus did when he was a grown-up. And what Jesus did say when he did finally grow up was that seeing him was the equivalent of seeing God, the Father. There's so many names for this, I feel like, that we use. I mean, Christians, we talk about God the Father, or maybe God of the Old Testament. And if you're not a Christian, then you might refer to it as the universe or the higher power, or, there's just these names of, like, I think a lot of us, we know that there is a higher power, someone that's out there, but it's so often this very faceless, nameless kind of being that we don't know much about. But Jesus did say he's basically the physical image of God. And so today I just want to share with you my pregnant thoughts on Christmas, and that meaning breaking down for you what can we actually tell about God based only on the way he came into the world. Making a baby, in human terms, is basically the most intimate thing that you can do with another human. So I think that means that God had to somehow become extremely intimate with Mary in order to conceive. This feels almost really offensive for me to say that, and I'm not suggesting that they actually had physical intercourse or anything like that. I don't know how it could happen, but I just think since God chose to come to the earth in this really, really human way, I doubt that he would just skip past over this part and snap his fingers and Mary's pregnant, especially knowing that he is a God who craves intimacy with us. And so I'm just going to leave that there. Do with it what you want. I don't have answers, but it's just think about it. The first sign of Emmanuel, God on this earth with us, was a missed period. There were no pregnancy tests, even though a pregnancy test doesn't feel very much more dignified than a missed period. But that was how Mary knew, shit, this is for real. Next thing is pregnancy takes such a long time. Obviously, it's not a long time compared to a lifetime, and certainly not a long time compared to eternity. But for the one who is in the middle of it, it's very long. Often we talk about pregnancy as if it's an event, but honestly, when you're in it, it feels way more like a lifestyle. It's nearly a year. Your life is turned upside down, and it's not just over real quick. And God chose to hang out inside of a tiny uterus floating around in amniotic fluid, which is basically baby urine, for 9 months. And that's all he did. I just need to leave this here for a second. God was in the womb for an entire pregnancy. And now we come to the birth. Have you ever given birth or watched somebody give birth? And if you haven't, I seriously suggest that you YouTube some birth vlogs or something, because there's tons out there. And I also suggest, if you're doing that, to look at some that are specifically unmedicated or like a home birth situation or something like that. Not because that's any better than any of the other types of births, but I'm really sure that Mary did not have an epidural, and so that's the kind of birth that she would have had. It is messy, as I wrote in my poem, desperate, euphoric. It is everything all mixed in together at once. And the most intimate, and some may say shameful, part of a woman was God's great entryway into this world. And it probably took a while to open up. I mean, he was obviously her first baby. She was a virgin. And at least in my experience, and I know a lot of other people's experiences, if it's the first one, it can take a while for that cervix to open up. So contraction after contraction, she's probably moaning with the pain of it, trying to just go with the flow and get herself through it, experiencing the pain and just being there with it. And the cervix just slowly starts to open up as God's head then finally gets to go into the birth canal, into her vagina. Maybe she just needed to push for a short time. Maybe it took a long time. It can totally vary. And maybe God's head needed to come into that type of cone shape like some babies do when they're in the birth canal for a long time. Like, that totally could have happened. Then finally, he was crowning. That's the literal term for when the head is just starting to peek out but isn't quite out yet. God literally crowned himself with the opening of a human vagina. Then the head was finally out. That's always the hardest part. Maybe Mary tore, maybe she didn't. I hope she didn't for her sake. And then probably the rest of the body was just pushed out much easier, probably with a huge gush of blood and amniotic fluid. And then God slid into probably the dirty and calloused hands of a carpenter and then laid on top of Mary's chest. The first bed that was recorded of Jesus was a feeding place for animals, but I'm pretty sure the first bed was really Mary's chest. And he probably laid there maybe while she still needed to birth the placenta, because let's not forget about that. That's a real part of birth. So she needed to push out the placenta, God's placenta, this weird organ that nourished him and gave him the oxygen he needed for those 9 long months that he was in the womb. Once that was done, probably she started to try and nurse him, brushing her nipple up against his cheek so that he would turn his head and try and latch. Maybe it happened right away. Maybe they struggled a while. Maybe he was really crying and fussing and it was hard, and probably the whole site down here where he had just come out of was still really hurting, and probably she was really exhausted. Those are all exactly things that I've experienced after giving birth. And I don't think God's birth must have been any different. Finally, probably God latched and had his first few gulps of colostrum. I could go literally on and on through all of the stages of newborn and postpartum and baby life and toddler life. But the point is, God didn't take shortcuts, it seems. He really did welcome the human experience. I mean, I have a 3-year-old, and honestly, it feels like he's been here forever. And he's gone through so many different stages of development. And he's literally just 3 years old. And so I imagine God going through every single one of those stages for a long time. Me right now, I'm just 25. That's still like probably 5 years before the age that God was when he started doing anything that wasn't just human. And I feel like I've been here forever. The point is, he really did just come to be with us, to be a part of our world. And he obviously deeply cares about the intricacies of our human experience, since he chose to undergo them himself. And just as one final note, because I am pregnant and I am in the midst of all of this, and to maybe some of those other mothers out there, I think he really showed how much he values all of the sacrifices that we do, and all of the pain and all of the transformation and all of the growth and all of the beauty. And he really sees that. And I'm sure he has so much reverence for that. I definitely did not make this video to be in any way vulgar or offensive, but these are just the facts. I'm literally just talking about human anatomy, and God literally chose to be a part of that, and it's written in history, and I think it says so much about who he is and who we can expect him to be for us, and I just think it's sweet and beautiful. So anyways, thanks for watching. Bam.